Gifford Pinchot was born on August 11, 1865, in Slimsbury, Connecticut. His family were well-to-do upper-class merchants, politicians, and landowners. Pinchot, as a young boy, took advantage of several opportunities to visit foreign countries, as well as gain a good education at some of the best Eastern schools. Not a single American had made forestry a profession, but when he entered Yale in 1885, his father asked, "How would you like to be a forester?" Pinchot stated, "I had no more conception of what it meant to be a forester than the man in the moon, but at least a forester worked in the woods. My father's suggestion settled the question in favor of forestry." Neither Yale nor any other university offered a degree or even a course in forestry. So Pinchot, after graduation, decided to study the subject in France. After a year of school, he returned to the United States to prepare for his lifelong work and interest. He worked as a resident forester for Vanderbilt's Baltimore Forest Estate for 3 years. Several years later, he became involved with the National Forest Commission, created by the National Academy of Sciences. He and several other members traveled through the West during the summer of 1896, investigating forest areas for possible forest reserves. 2 years later, he was named chief of the Division of Forestry. His friend, Theodore Roosevelt, was elevated to the presidency by the assassination of President McKinley. The management of the National Forest Reserves was transferred from the Department of the Interior to the Agriculture and the new Forest Service in 1905. The chief, or forester, of the new Forest Service was Gifford Pinchot. Pinchot, with Roosevelt's willing approval, restructured and professionalized the management of the national forests, as well as greatly increased their number and area. He had a strong hand in guiding the organization toward the utilitarian philosophy of the greatest good for the greatest number. Pinchot, though, added the phrase, "in the long run," to emphasize that forest management consisted of long-term decisions. During his period in office, the Forest Service and the National Forests grew greatly. In 1905, the National Forest Reserves numbered 60 units, covering 56 million acres. In 1910, there were 150 national forests, covering 172 million acres. The pattern of effective organization and management was set during Pinchot's administration. Conservation, an idea he popularized, natural resources in the broad sense of wise use, became a widely known concept and an accepted national goal. Gifford Pinchot is generally regarded as the father of American conservation because of his great and unrelenting concern for the protection of American forests. He was the primary founder of the Society of American Foresters, which first met at his home in Washington in 1900. He served as a chief with great distinction, motivating and providing leadership in the management of natural resources and the protection of the national forests. He continued as a forester until 1910, when he was fired by President Taft in a controversy over coal claims in Alaska. Gifford Pinchot wrote, "When I came home, not a single acre of government, state, or private timberland was under the systematic forest management anywhere on the most richly timbered of all continents. When the Great 90s began, the common word for our forests was inexhaustible. To waste timber was a virtue, not a crime. There would always be plenty of timber. The lumbermen regarded forest devastation as normal, and second growth as a delusion of fools. As for sustained yield, no such idea had entered their heads. The few friends the forest had were spoken of, when they were spoken of at all, as impractical theorists, fanatics, or more or less touched in the head. What talk there was about forest protection was no more to the average American than the buzzing of a mosquito, just about as irritating. Without natural resources, life itself is impossible. From birth to death, natural resources, transformed for human use, feed, clothe, shelter, and transport us. Upon them we depend for every material necessity. comfort, convenience, and the protection of our lives. Without abundant resources, prosperity is out of reach.